Well, we're in Psalm 16. We left it off in the end of verse 3 is where we stopped on Friday. So let me read up to verse 4 and then we'll go forward. Preserve me. So David's praying. This is a prayer of protection and provision and preservation. God, sustain me. God, provide for me. God, I'm putting all of my reliance, all of my dependence in you. Now you're going to see the contrast here about the decision that David's making. For in thee do I put my trust. O my soul, thou hast said unto the Lord, thou art my Lord. My goodness extendeth not to thee, but to the saints that are in the earth, and to the excellent, in whom is all my delight. So David said, this is one-way goodness. You're giving me your goodness. I don't bring you my goodness, but I can give my goodness from you, once it becomes mine, to others, to the saints that are in the earth, in whom is all my delight. I love God's people, is what he's saying. Look at verse 4. Their sorrows shall be multiplied that hasten after another God. Their drink offerings of blood will I not offer, nor take up their names into my lips. Now, what David's doing in verse 4 is he's contrasting the decision that he's made to trust the Lord, to look to God as his ultimate Lord and truest, deepest Lord. And God is his provision, his security, his provider, his protector, his sustainer. He's contrasting that to those that worship idols. And he's using terminology that we may not readily identify with, but we should, and I'll show you why. Their sorrows, who's there? Well, the people that choose idols or false gods. Those false gods are not real gods. They're not responsive gods. They're not loving. They're not persons. They don't have personhood. They're inanimate objects, man-made idols, gods of our own making. So when they multiply other gods to themselves, that exercise merely increases sorrows, okay? So like following God increases gladness and joy, and choosing the lordship of Jesus increases happiness. Now that's not the motive. The motive is Jesus is Lord because he's Lord, okay? The motive of following Jesus is I want to align my life with what is true and what is real, not simply my experiential pleasure, okay? That's the byproduct. Because life has its own displeasure woven in. So we don't want to set this up so that God is destined to fail me, because life has some displeasure to it, okay? But increased sorrow is always the product of idolatry. But look at the next phrase. Their drink offerings of blood will I not offer. Well, this was the bloody practice of pagan religions. I believe this traces all the way back to the beginning of time, when God explained to Adam and Eve that the shedding of blood was necessary for the remission of sins. You wonder, where did these pagan religions get the idea of sacrificing and drinking blood to their false gods? Well, God never instituted the drinking of blood, okay? That didn't come from God. But the shedding of blood did come from God. It came from the idea that our sin brings death. And the shedding of the blood, the sacrifice, was a picture of the death that sin required, but ultimately the death that Jesus would die. Well, remove God from the equation, move that into pagan practice, and you have all over the world people that are shedding blood, even their own or the blood of their children, on the altar or to the sacrifice or worship of pagan deities. And then consuming that blood. And what is that idea? Okay, the idea is, in some sense, in some pagan, ancient sense, and mystical sense, frankly, I am drinking life. I'm drinking the life force. I am partaking in the provision of the life that these gods or this God force gave to these creatures, and I am increasing my life force. Well, God teaches that pagan practice is not only sinful and wicked, it's not true, okay? That's not the point of blood sacrifice. Jesus is the point of blood sacrifice. But in pagan worship, still to this day all over the world, this kind of blood sacrifice and the drinking and consuming of blood is happening. Very common in David's day. Well, now, we don't really identify with that at a 21st century American context. We don't think of that in the same way. But do we not expend our blood, sweat, and tears on idols of our own making, things that consume our lives, things that we look to as ultimate things to sustain our lives, to give us identity? Do we not spend our life on things that ultimately, as our lesser lords, ultimately end up oppressing us? Okay. See, idolatry in 21st century America is much more philosophical, much more ideological, much more practical than in pagan culture or in third world cultures. Although there's plenty of worshiping of stones and trees in American culture, we're not so much about carving our own gods and drinking the blood of animals, except in the most extreme situations, cultic situations. But we are very much about spending our blood, sweat, and tears on lesser gods, the god of work, the god of materialism, the god of pleasure, the god of sex, the god of power, the god of fame. And yeah, we will expend our lives on these things, literally worship these things, looking for them to do what? Verse 1, preserve me. We look to our job and our paycheck and our material world to preserve us and secure us and provide for us. And David is warning us that life, even though it's not carving a stone or worshiping, to a wooden god, even though it may not be slaughtering an animal and drinking the blood like in an ancient pagan culture, when we expend our life, when we pour our blood, sweat, and tears out for a lesser god, an idol of work or materialism or money or pleasure, that God will only increase our sorrows. It's a life driven to sustain itself, to save itself. And I'm trying to think, it was Tim Keller, I think, that said, Jesus is the only Lord who loves you unconditionally. And he will love you even when you fail. Your lesser gods, they will crush you when you fail, and then they will fail you. They will devastate you. So there's still a lot of 21st century practical truth in David's principle that their sorrows shall be multiplied that hasten after another god, that drink offerings of blood. Will I not offer, he says, nor take up their names into my lips. You know what David's conclusion is in this verse? I've chosen my Lord. He makes the decisions of my life. I follow him, and I will not offer my life to any lesser deity. Now, my friend, think about the gods of 21st century America. Are you giving your life to those gods, or are you going to live your life today following, truly looking to the one true God, the Lord Jesus, for your preservation? He will walk with you today. Hey, happy Tuesday. We'll see you tomorrow. Have a great day.